For those of you that don't know me, I'm Karen. I'm founder of Blomma Beauty, and we're an organic beauty and wellbeing company. We stock lots of different conscious wellbeing and beauty brands, but a big part of what we do is helping people learn as much as they can about conscious wellbeing, the products, and most importantly, the people behind the brands. And one of the brands that we stock is called Life Armour, which is a natural supplement brand centered around adaptogens to help us tackle stress. And they have a couple of products that are specifically formulated to help us combat stress in our lives. And that's what we're here to talk about today, stress. And stress is a necessary kind of everyday part of life. We all go through it at one time or another. And now more than ever seemed like a really good time to delve deeper into what causes stress and find out how we can cope with those feelings a little bit better. So tonight I'm joined by 3 stress experts who are going to break this topic down for us from various different angles. And of course the event is all about asking the experts. So if you've got questions as we go along, pop them in the comments on the side, and we'll come back to you at the end and answer all of them if we've got time. So I'm just going to introduce our guests now, and hopefully here they all are. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hello. And first we have Marishka, who is founder of the brand Life Armour Nutrition. She's almost the inspiration for our chat tonight. And as I mentioned, her range harnesses adaptogens to nourish from within and protect against the stresses and strains of modern life. So she's going to be sharing her insights on the effects stress can have on us physically and how adaptogens can combat this. Hello, Marishka.
Hey everyone, hi.
And then we've got Dr. Christie Lewis, who's a former NHS GP. During her career, she saw hundreds of patients who were showing the signs of burnout and stress, and also experienced this herself, which kind of started her journey to transition to a health and life coach. She's going to be talking about the impact of stress on our health from a doctor's perspective. Hello, Christie.
Hello.
And then last but not least, we have Windas. She's a nutritionist and naturopath. She's also co-founder of holistic wellbeing brand Armour. She helps people who are suffering with fatigue, digestive stress and burnout, and she's going to be talking about how nutrition can help us tackle that and be healthier, more balanced and productive. Hello, Lauren.
Hello.
So we'll just start by jumping in and hearing a little bit more from our experts. So we'll start with you, Marishka. How did you come to start Life Armour?
Yeah, the brand is all built out of the insight that stress has on our health and well-being. So myself, I had experienced quite, just day-to-day stresses, but so many people around me had talked about how stress was impacting them, whether that was through demanding jobs, juggling children and jobs, or just generally as stress arises during our day-to-day lives. And there was so much talked about how stress affects our mental health, but not really about the impact of stress on our physical well-being and our health and well-being. And the more people I spoke to, when they looked at the supplement category, which is something that I did myself, I didn't really know where to begin and what could help me. And I found it incredibly confusing to shop. And the more research I did to see what I could find to help me, I realised actually there was a lot of products on the market that really lacked quality and didn't really have there was bulking agents in there and fillers, and they weren't necessarily natural. So I thought, consumers deserve better, and I thought I could give people something better than this. And that's really how Life Armour was born last year.
Amazing. Yeah, and it's been such a short period of time since you've launched, but already, you're already working with Lauren and Christie, who are, experts. They've got their own practices. Christie, maybe you could talk to us about how you transitioned from being a GP to a health and life coach. I guess your GP experience stood you in good stead to take on that new challenge.
Definitely. And I experienced a huge amount of stress and burnout. It actually started more in the junior doctor years before I actually ended up becoming a GP. And I realised that I was just not getting the right balance in my life. I was working every hour of the day, every weekend, night shifts. And I, in the spare moment I had, I would be grabbing food, exercising every second of the day, and then at the weekend when I did have time off, I would then suddenly go and see people and socialise and see my friends and family. And then, as a GP as well, I was working every hour of the day, and I realised that stress was actually causing me so many physical and mental health issues, just like Marishka just said, and I realised my hormones were all over the place, I was gaining weight, my skin was dreadful, and I wasn't sleeping, I was exhausted all the time, and I was absolutely miserable. And it was really when I realised that myself, and I could feel myself burning out, when my relationship was falling apart and everything was sort of going wrong in my life, that I knew something had to change. And actually, I've also seen so many patients as a GP coming into my practice with exactly the same signs and symptoms, and a lot of these times it's been because of stress. And so I really needed to help, and because I was actually really frustrated with the fact that I only had 10 minutes in my GP, and so I realized that I was hardly I was only really touching the surface. I was hardly getting to the root cause of the problem. And that's when I realized that I needed to change careers. And although I'm still a GP at the moment, I've really cut down on my hours. And now I've opened up my health and life coaching business, where I spend a lovely hour with my patients or clients, really helping them uncover the root cause of their stress, their anxiety, and hopefully to prevent them from burning out. So that's my journey.
Amazing, thank you. And Lauren, for you, maybe it's a sort of similar thing, because I think so many, I guess, medical symptoms of stress also are linked to nutrition. And you speak with people on a daily basis about how their digestion is affected by the stress that they're feeling. Tell us about how you started to become a nutritionist.
Yeah, so quite similar to Christie, actually. It started with me probably about 8 years ago now, which makes me feel very old now. But it was when I was in university doing my English literature degree at the time, and it was my second year, and I actually became very unwell with a viral infection. And following that viral infection, my health just was a spiral of decline after that. And I remember just kind of recovering from the symptoms of the cold and the virus and everything else, but I just never felt fully right after that. And long story short, I was diagnosed with ME syndrome, which is one of those illnesses which is understood from a conventional perspective, and a lot of doctors would kind of give you the diagnosis but not necessarily tell you exactly what's going on with you, which almost leaves you in a bit of a limbo land, because you're not really sure what's going on with your body, but you literally are exhausted. And I suffered all kinds of different symptoms, from obviously the severe fatigue and burnout to digestive distress, brain fog, neurological, mental problems, anxiety, IBS. So all of it kind of, rooted its way in kind of me navigating it through diet and lifestyle interventions. And, nutrition was a huge part of that in terms of my recovery, and looking at, which I'm sure we'll go on to talk about later, is like the gut and, how it's all interconnected. But also for me, stress and tackling stress was a huge angle in terms of my recovery. So it made me realize that there was more to, I guess, healing than just what I guess the doctors would conventionally lead you to believe. And there's so much more when it comes to our lifestyle that we can do in order to promote our health and our well-being. And I think you kind of go on your own personal journey, I think, with these things, and you learn so much. And as a result, that's what I now try to pass on to my clients and educate them.
Amazing. I mean, all great inspirational stories, and already we're seeing lots of different facets of the topic of stress. So I guess if we almost like reverse and strip it back to basics, it's probably a good place to start and try to define stress. So Marishka, maybe you could help us do that. What is stress in essence?
Yeah, I think actually, I think Christie's probably the best person, if that's all right with you, because I'm always conscious of the GP as part of this.
I know you're good at answering this, though. You've done it.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, though, Marishka, because I guess I can define stress from a from a medical point of view. But I guess in a way we all see stress, it's very subjective, isn't it, if you say what is stress, because we feel stress in different ways, don't we? But I'm more than happy to explain if people want to know about like what actually happens to our bodies when we're stressed.
Yes.
Would that be helpful?
Yeah, go for it.
So essentially, I mean, stress is actually an amazing evolutionary creation, because essentially it was created to allow us to survive from any threat or danger that came at us. Now, we're talking millions and billions of years ago when we were sort of in the caves, and we really actually were up against real danger. Like I don't know if it was an animal or another caveman, but essentially we were having to fight for our lives, and that's when our stress response really actually protected us hugely. And the way it works is when we see danger or perceive a threat, we have a sudden rush of our stress hormones, which you'll probably know about: adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. And when those hormones are released, we get a number of different things happening. Our heart rate increases and our blood pressure increases to bring lots of blood all the way to the muscles and the brain, which we need in a way to fight or run away. So it's called the fight or flight response. So we're either going to be fighting up against the danger or running away. And so our heart rate and our blood pressure increases to get the blood around our bodies, and we get a huge dump of glucose, so that instant sugar hit that goes straight to the muscles to allow us to run or at least fight, and also to the brain, so we're on high alert. Our pupils dilate, we feel hot and ready, and we almost feel that kind of desire to be motivated to run or fight. And at the same time, the things that we don't need to help us survive switch off, like our digestion and our sex hormones. So those couple of things, are just left aside because we don't need to procreate and digest food when we're trying to survive here. And then at the same time, we've got obviously heightened awareness, ready to fight, and so that's amazing. It prepares us to do that, to run away or fight. Also, our immune system ramps up, and the little stress messengers called cytokines are sort of dispersed, and they're amazing because they tell the body that if we were to fall over and hurt ourselves, or if we were if we did get injured, that it would cause all the platelets, our little clotting blood things, to form a clot if we did start bleeding, or if we did get infected by something, then our body would be ready to fight that infection. So it's actually an amazing creation to allow us to survive in actual danger. The issue now is that we don't really have that actual danger in our lives at the moment. We're very fortunate that we have quite nice lives at the moment, and we don't have that actual danger. We've just got what we would call minor stresses in our lives, but they're still causing the same stress response. And this is where the issue lies, because we, in that imminent danger, we have that stress response there, and it should only last that short period of time, essentially when we were fighting or running away. And then when the danger has gone, everything settles back to normal, and our digestion goes back to normal, and our sex hormones kick back in. However, in the modern world, we've got chronic stress. And that's meaning all our stress hormones are staying high and they're not coming down. And this is where the digestive issues, the hormone issues, and all of that sort of stuff plays its part, and so many other health issues. But essentially, that is what stress is.
Thank you. And I guess the modern stress, if you put it, it's more of that sustained feeling of minor stresses. And you touched a lot about the effect it can have on the digestion. I mean, Lauren, what's your take on how stress can affect our nutrition and our diet and how we respond to food?
Yeah, so from a digestive health angle, stress, obviously, as Christie was saying, when we go into that fight or flight response, we prioritize those major tasks that are going to keep us in survival mode. Whereas when obviously we're kind of looking at digestion, that's one of the things that is like put on the back burner. So if we're in a state of chronic stress, we're not going to be digesting our food. We're not going to be taking in and absorbing our nutrients. So for those of my clients that have IBS, I always talk to them just as much about nutrition as I do with their stress, because it goes hand in hand. And if, you could be eating the perfect diet, but if you're stressed, you're not going to be digesting, you're not going to be absorbing your nutrients. And also stress has been shown to deplete these beneficial bacteria that live within our gut, and that's called the microbiome. So we're now looking at how on like a biochemical level, we're now starting to see how stress is having that effect on our physiology, which is really interesting, but obviously plays its significance when it comes to our digestive health specifically.
Sure, and I guess as well, the digestion and nutrition kind of feeds into Marishka with Life Armour, because adaptogens are medicinal herbs that can help to balance or help protect us when our fight or flight mode is kind of activated. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Adaptogens, yeah, absolutely. So I discovered when I started looking at how we would formulate the brand last year, I really wanted the products to be natural. It was really important to me, and also vegan friendly. And adaptogens have been around for thousands of years, actually. So they have been used in Ayurvedic medicine and also in Chinese medicine as well. For a host of different reasons, and they're really starting to bubble to the surface now. Adaptogens essentially are bioplant actives, and they live in extreme conditions, and they effectively adapt to the conditions within which they live in. And then the adaptogens that we use, essentially the way they work is they detect where the body is experiencing stress, and they bring the body back into something called homeostasis, which is essentially balance. So that is, and different adaptogens will work in different ways according to what your need is. So you have different adaptogens sort of a link to sleep, for example, versus stress or energy. And so we'd use different ones accordingly. And we always use where we have proven evidence. Ideally, we look for clinical evidence, but because this is a more natural alternative, it isn't like pharmacy products where there are years and years of clinical data on them. But where we are able to is we use a strain of ashwagandha called KSM 66, and that has huge amounts of clinical evidence against it, and particularly strong evidence around a number of parameters. But one of those in particular is really reducing stress and anxiety. So that is in our Super Me capsules and in our Energize capsules as well, because it helps to promote energy naturally. But we use a host of other well-known adaptogens as well to manage stress.
Perfect, thank you. And I guess we've talked about the different effects stress can have on us, but there's lots of different causes of stress. Lauren, what in your clients that you see on a regular basis, are there particular trends or themes of the types of stress that people are going through at the moment?
Yeah, I'd say firstly, the big one is obviously what's going on in the current climate at the moment, which I guess kind of goes to a point of stresses that we can control and what we can't control. So I talk to a lot of my clients about something micro and macro stresses. So your micro stresses are kind of like your minor day-to-day things that stress you out, that maybe are not necessarily particularly severe, but they can still obviously take their toll and they can build up on you. And then you've got macro stresses, and those are the things that tend to be out of our control. So a micro stressor might be something, I don't know, you've forgotten to check your TfL app, for example, on the way to work, and you find out that your tube's delayed and you're late for work, or you forgot to set your alarm or whatever. But a macro stressor might be the current climate, coronavirus. Obviously, we're all in lockdown, and it's a situation we can't control, but it's obviously going to cause overwhelming anxiety and stress for a lot of people. So I'd say for a lot of my clients, it's kind of a fine balance between those types of things. But generally speaking, I think we're all so different when it comes to stress, and we all react so differently. But there are those kind of major things from, it could be relationships are huge stress causes. And the way that, say, if we have like a fallout with a loved one or a friend, it really plays on people's emotions and takes its toll, from financial pressures or work pressures, health problems as well. So, and I think sometimes as well, when it comes to stress, and a lot of my clients who, particularly those who've got IBS and digestive troubles, it can be a bit of a vicious cycle because often they're stressed because they've got gut problems and the stress is, perpetuating their issues. So it's quite interesting to see how stress plays such a significant role when it comes to their symptoms. But just generally speaking, I'd say everyone kind of suffers with different types of stresses, and obviously we're all so different, but generally the main one's coronavirus at the moment.
Yes, I can imagine. Hopefully we're coming down the hill now, as we've just heard. Yeah. So yeah, fingers crossed. And Christie, for you in your GP practice, what are there any sort of other symptoms, I guess, of stress that would come out that people can maybe resonate with?
Definitely, and the thing is, a lot of people do come in with other symptoms, and it's only until you start to unravel the picture that actually you realise that stress is actually a huge part of why they've come in. So for example, you might have a lot of neck tension or shoulder tension or back problems, and because when we're stressed, we do carry the weight, the world. The weight of the world on our shoulders, and so we do get a lot of muscle tension and neck and back problems. But also, we get a lot of headaches, and that might be because there's a lot of reasons why we get headaches, but it could be because we may be jumping for caffeine or fizzy drinks, not drinking enough water, maybe not getting enough sleep. Again, tension can cause a lot of that as well in the neck muscles. Also, if we're using our laptops, reading emails late at night, and using our phone to get eye strain, headaches is often a sign as well. And then we've got all the other issues such as hormonal problems, so irregular periods if you're female, maybe fertility issues, also digestive issues, as Lauren touched on as well. And then also sort of the symptoms of anxiety, so maybe something called palpitations, where you feel your heart racing and skipping a beat, or you feel that your heart is generally running a little bit higher. You might even feel quite anxious, so like shaky and just on all the time, and feel quite sweaty. And so there's a lot of symptoms that can come out from a physical point of view because of stress.
Thank you. And it sounds like a lot of them are maybe symptoms that we wouldn't necessarily connect with being linked to stress. We might not even know that we're feeling stressed. Mm-hmm. How can we learn to better spot those signs of stress, Marishka? I mean, Christie mentioned headaches or tension. You could be thinking, I've just been working out a bit too much, but actually it's linked to something else. How can we spot those signs?
Yeah, I think that, the lifestyle that we all lead is so switched on, and we're always on the go, in one way or another. And it's about finding those moments to really check in with yourself and just see, if you've noticed, like talking about that increased tension in the back, is there something that you think could be triggering that? Or, a lot of people phone me and say that they really struggle with sleep as well. And it's either the struggle to get to sleep or waking up in the night, persistent, unwanted thoughts, and, that just constant going through, whatever it is, the endless to-do list. And it's trying to just then perhaps you to take some time out to take a note of when you're noticing these, and then see if you could link it to triggers. So maybe start your day and end your day with just writing down if you've noticed how you're feeling, or just check in with yourself mentally as well. If you're, when no one's going to the coffee shop right now, or when you're standing next to the kettle, waiting for it to boil, just have a think. Don't, put your phone down and think, check in with yourself, and what could be causing this. And then think of, when you do feel good, what have you done that day that's different to the days where you're feeling the headaches or the tension, the problems with sleep or energy.
Perfect. And then maybe another one for Lauren. How we've talked about spotting the signs of stress. We've talked about how we might feel when we're feeling stressed, but in your practice, how do you specifically coach people? Have you got any tips that you can translate, without giving it all away, a few things that we can incorporate into our day-to-day lives?
Yeah, I think one for when people are feeling specifically anxious and quite tense or just very overwhelmed, is, I don't know if anyone's heard of, you ladies have heard of tapping. It's called the freedom technique.
Yeah.
And it's based on think it's Ayurvedic medicine, and it's basically where you're tapping on like meridian points, which are energy points within the body, which are believed to get blocked up when, say, we're stressed. And the idea is that you're just tapping on them. And in fact, you don't necessarily need to believe in, I guess the mechanisms behind it. And sometimes people think it sounds a bit woo-woo, but actually, it's just a way of coping with stress and actually letting your body have a release. So you could start with like a karate chop, which is here, and then you move towards the temples, and then under the eyes, and then under the nose, and you just tap on them. And sometimes you could say things to yourself like, I accept these feelings of anxiety. You do under the armpit as well, and you just keep doing that. And sometimes I find it personally to be really transformative. It helps me just kind of get out of my own head. And to just tap on those meridian points whenever I am feeling stressed. And then I think another one is kind of putting like motivational notes around the house. So if ever I'm feeling, especially now because we're at home quite a lot, just having, and I've got something with me now actually, just to show you guys. But for instance, if I'm feeling anxious, like I'll have this in my bathroom, just when I'm brushing my teeth, which is like I can see evidence against my anxiety. So like positive mantras that will reinforce things that are positive. And the more you kind of expose yourself to that positive psychology, and it just takes you out of that negative mindset. So I find that's really transformative, and a lot of my clients do as well. So I'd say those two are kind of the big ones.
That's so useful. I love the notes around the house. That's really lovely.
Oh, thank you. Really beneficial.
Mariska or Christie, do you have any other tips for how we can handle stress a little bit better?
Yeah. No, you go, Marishka, you go.
So I find exercise actually is a huge help for me. I mean, in a number of ways, I found it really transformative. I've been running further actually, and I've found that really quite, transformative for me personally, and I have felt energized from it as well. It helps clear the head. Often I don't go with music, I just run and just enjoy the outside space and really use it to clear my head. And actually I won't, because Lauren has talked about it, but I have used the tapping. I haven't used the tapping on the meridian points, but I have used finger tapping, which I discovered last year. And just doing it, because no one can see you doing it. You can do it when you're walking down the streets. You talk about being in your own head. But if you're literally just tapping your fingers, you're not able to be in your head because it's incredibly distracting. And that voice in your head can be quite, all-consuming. And then the other one for me is really about finding moments to stop and take a breath. I think when we realise and we actually do it proactively, you will realise how probably a lot of the times during the day, we're not properly deep breathing. We're just using this upper chest piece here, and it's all quite short, rushed. So just even if it's 5 minutes to take time out and do some breathing, that really helps me as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And Christie, did you have any?
Yeah, I've got a couple actually, because I do all of those things that you've just mentioned, which is amazing because we're obviously all on the same page here. But I think it's so key, and I really try and urge my clients to have a bit of a digital detox, because I really think, particularly at the moment, because we're always on the laptops, we're always on the phones or watching TV, it's so all-consuming, and particularly at this moment in time, I'm sure everyone's got the news on at sort of 5-6 o'clock in the afternoon, and you've probably got it on in the background. I've stopped all my alerts and notifications on my phone because suddenly I was getting pings of like news alerts and notifications from WhatsApp and all sorts of social media things. And I think it's so important just to have that time, just that space away from social media and just external influences. And I think it's so good to have time away from the phone and the TV and the screen throughout the day, for definite. But even if you just have a weekend of not trying not to use some devices, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, and then we're all always switched on, aren't we? Whether we can work on our phones, hang out on our phones, everything. It's really important. I love that one.
I know, and these are like the micro stresses as well, like Lauren was mentioning as well. These, although it might be quite nice to get a notification here and there, suddenly if we're feeling stressed, that those extra stresses can really make us feel quite overwhelmed and sort of tip us over the edge. I think the other thing I love and I talk about is gratitude, because I'm so passionate about it, because, you know, we can always, even if we've had the most stressful, awful day, we can always find something we're grateful for. So I always try and encourage my clients to think of 3 things we're grateful for at the end of the day. And I like sharing it with the family, share it with the children, get everyone involved. I think it's just such a simple way of changing our mindset from being more negative into a positive one. And it naturally lowers our stress hormones, which is perfect.
Lovely. And I guess last question on the handling of stress. I think if we're not that good at spotting the signs of when we feel stressed, we might not know if we're good or not at relieving those stressful situations. Do you think there's a point at which our bodies will kind of tell us that we're feeling stressed, or do you think it's just a case of learning that we need to spot the signs for ourselves? Who would want to answer this one?
I'm happy to, but it's up to you.
I don't mind.
Go on, Lauren.
Okay. All right then. So I was going to say, I mean, some people kind of float around and don't necessarily always realise they're stressed. And I've had some clients that just and I can see that they're stressed, but categorically they will refuse to say that they're stressed, that they think they're very resilient. But I think I think I've got a bit of a knack for kind of sensing it in people now. And I think you can kind of gauge when you see the way that they're behaving, whether it's, I talk a lot about the way, you know, kind of people move around and their energy, because if people are talking fast, they're walking around, charging about fast, they're floating through their days, just frazzled, and yet they think that they can handle it. Because I think we celebrate, I'm sure we'll go on to talk about, we celebrate stress a lot. Yes. So there's a lot of people like that who think that they're just naturally resilient, and they might not necessarily have initial symptoms, but it's more kind of on their mental health, and they just kind of think that that they aren't really, I guess, suffering with stress. But I think it's for them, when they take their time out and they take some time to kind of, I don't know whether it's a weekend or unload, maybe they start to kind of be aware of that. And I do think it's a process of learning, observing, and until maybe their body throws up a symptom, that might be the time for them to actually take the time out and have that wake-up call. But yeah,
I mean, Marishka and I have talked about this at length on the various other things that we've done together, but I think we're almost conditioned to feel that stress is acceptable. Like, we always should be on and fast-paced and 24/7 contactable, and, you know, almost, I work really well under pressure. You know, you hear all these phrases when you're at work, but, you know, actually, is it that healthy? And I think you've touched upon it there, Lauren, but maybe Marishka, you can go into a bit more detail about, you know, how can that sustained approach to our lives impact us in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, it impacts. Like Christie talked earlier as well about how stress ultimately does, sustained levels of cortisol peaks, which is the stress hormone, will ultimately impact your overall health and well-being. So whether that be in digestive issues, reproduction, you know, sex hormones switching off, those are just a few, or putting on weight is another one. But that just then can lead in the longer term to even more serious conditions around heart conditions and diabetes. So you have people, for example, that have worked hard, played hard for a long time, and then all of a sudden, you know, they've ignored possibly the signs as well, because they're the kind of individual that Lauren's just spoken about. And actually, you know, they're then hit with, you know, some kind of more serious condition. Maybe it's a heart attack or something. But why? I don't know. I think slowly we're hopefully starting to change. There is this element of, celebrating that we're the busiest and we're, you know, under the most pressure. But I think, and organisations definitely are very conscious, particularly in this climate, of what the pressures are on people. And, you know, this is a very unprecedented pressure that we're all living through, but it does ultimately impact workplace wellness. And I think there's a stat that I think it costs workplaces 34 billion it is a year or something to manage just, you know, the impact that stress has on absence, and then whether that means a prolonged absence. So, you know, it's in employers' interest to make sure their employees are working to their, you know, to their optimum. So, there is only so much a person can do, in a day, and the productivity, if they're there at 7 a.m. and still there at 7 p.m., they're not, there is going to be a productivity gap in some of that.
Yes.
And I think this is teaching us as well to just slow down. We've been forced, haven't we, to slow down, and just figure out, how are there other ways that you can spend your time and maybe look after yourself.
Yeah, and I think take time out for self-care, focusing on your well-being, and maybe consider this is as a check-in with yourself, with your stress and your lifestyle. And I guess it's kind of a nice moment to touch upon the kind of practices that you both have, Christie and Lauren. Can you, Christie, tell us a little bit more about your practice as a life coach, and if someone signed up to maybe your services to talk about stress, what they could expect from you?
Yeah, of course, thank you. So essentially, I really touch upon stress, anxiety, and burnout in my clinic. And so what happens is if somebody is interested and is struggling with stress or anxiety and wants to kind of uncover it a bit more, and really help to manage those, coping with stress and anxiety, or if they have sadly reached burnout, how to get back out of it and start back into, rebuilding a happy, healthy life. What happens is I tend to do a little discovery call just to have a chat with the client, because you need to make sure that you're going to get on with that coach, because coaches, we unsurface a lot of stuff from the client, and it's hard work, and the client has all the answers. We don't have all the answers, they do. And so what we do as coaches is just try and encourage people to just find out and utilize what they already know, and actually motivate them to make the changes. And so what I do is I have that call just to make sure that they we're going to relate and be okay, because you need to form quite a close relationship with each other. And then I do all my calls remotely, and so it's quite nice, particularly in this climate at the moment, that we do things online. And then what we do is we just really uncover what the causes of anxiety and stress are, and unravel all the potential triggers, and really try and help give everyone the client the motivation and the tools to really be able to cope with all the stresses and anxieties in their life, and then be able to kind of prioritize what they want in their life, to be able to actually just live a happy, more fulfilled life, hopefully with less stress and anxiety. The thing is, we're never going to get away from the fact that we're going to have stresses and anxiety. It's just how you cope with it in the end. So it's having your toolbox and being able to sort of take out the tools at the right time to be able to manage that stress and anxiety when they need to.
Great. And Lauren, you have a couple of different things. You have some courses and then you have some consultations. What could people expect if you want to tackle nutrition and stress together, 2 in 1?
Yeah, all in one. I'd say they both definitely go in tandem. The way that I work, my clinic is normally based in Chelsea, but obviously is now online for the foreseeable future. So the way that I work is I would typically, so I obviously do focus a lot on food, but I think with that comes mindset, because when you're talking about nutrition and dietary changes, obviously it's important to actually get to the root of why somebody is struggling with their diet, to actually understand if they're emotionally eating and why they have these issues with food. And so I've just completed my training with the National Centre for Eating Disorders, because I'm so interested in psychology and the way that psychology and food are interconnected. So the way that I would work is I send like a 7-day food diary to clients. I get them to fill that in, so it gives me a bit of a picture of what they're eating from a day-to-day basis, just a bit of a snapshot. And then from there, I send them an in-depth health questionnaire, which again, like Christie was saying, it gives you a bit of more information, it gives you the answers to understand a little bit more about about that client and what it is specifically that they want to work on, whether it's a symptom or a specific goal that they want to achieve, and then we move forwards from there. And sometimes I might conduct functional testing, so when it comes to stress we can actually test the adrenal hormones, or if they've got, say, digestive issues, I might do a stool analysis to actually get a picture of what their microbiome's looking like. So if there's any kind of inflammatory markers in the gut, to dysbiosis, which is like bacterial imbalances, to really get an understanding of that client's unique health picture from a functional perspective, and then understanding what steps we can target with nutritional intervention, but also obviously from a mindset perspective, understanding how they can make steps forward to make those changes. Because obviously if they're at a stumbling block with emotional eating or something like that, that's going to stand in the way of their well-being and obviously them getting to reach their goals or improve their symptoms. So that's a bit about me in a nutshell. And yeah, so I'd say the two definitely go hand in hand.
Yeah, it sounds like it's very complicated steps, but luckily you guys are out there trying to help us combat this. But if we maybe, we're not ready to make that step or that commitment, and we just want something that's going to help us handle stress on the daily, if you like. Marishka, tell me about how your products can help us tackle, dealing with stress. Someone's asked, Karen has just asked, are there any natural supplements we can use? Obviously there's CBD, but anything else? And you've definitely got something else.
Absolutely. Yes. So I was working on something around CBD. Yes. And obviously CBD has some good things and some downsides to it as well. And one of those is around really quality and making sure you're getting quality. So the adaptogens that we use, there are two products in particular that are very much focused on stress. We have our Super Me capsules, and you take 2 of those a day, and within 2 to 4 weeks you're building up resilience to daily stresses. And we have 4 ingredients in there, so we only ever have ingredients in our products at active levels. So as a brand you won't see really long ingredient lists, because the reality is the ones at the bottom of that list probably aren't doing very much. So in SuperMe we have 4 products, all have data against the efficacy to reduce stress and anxiety. One, which is the ashwagandha, has clinical data against it. We also have our drops of balance, and that's like a liquid supplement essentially, and you can take that as often as you want every day, and you can either just put it directly under your tongue and swallow it, and if you're used to taking CBD or used to that, or you can dilute it in a little bit of water, and that is the fastest way to get actives into your system. And you will feel, some people say to me they feel it pretty instantly. For others it's between 15 minutes and an hour, and they really have this sense of calm and feeling a bit more centered and focused. And that's essentially, again, we've used in that we also use some ashwagandha, we use shatavari and shishandra, all really high level adaptogens that will help the body respond to the stress that they're feeling at that time. What I will say, and this is a big part of the brand, is that, supplementing is one part of it. And that's why I'm so lucky to collaborate with people like Lauren and Dr. Christie, because it really is about a holistic approach to it. So, let's take energy. If energy is an issue for you, if you're, having 8 cups of coffee a day, and you've still got low energy and you've got a bit of the jitters, and you're maybe taking our Energize capsule as well, that is, gives you that caffeine-free sort of boost. You've got to be looking after yourself in other ways as well. So it is about a holistic approach. But that's those 2 particular products are really focused on stress and anxiety.
Thank you. And we'll link to those products at the end in the comments. So if you're interested in learning more about those and adaptogens, you can take a look at that. And Marishka, you touched upon it, but Christie and Lauren, you advocate Marishka's products in your clinics. Christie, how do you mix the two, your practice and Marishka's products? How do you kind of blend that into the advice you're giving people?
Yeah, so essentially, Marishka's absolutely right. It's a 360-degree approach to health, which is so important. And so, if I generally find people coming to me with trouble sleeping, and so, I often start with the very simple hygiene advice, and always suggest, well, why don't you think about a natural, supplement such as her drops of slumber, and so they're really nice kind of more gentle ways of helping with sleep, because as a GP, sleeping tablets are strong, and there's lots of side effects, and so often I try and give that sort of 360-degree approach and suggest, well, what about like a mild sleeping sort of supplement alongside the other lifestyle changes that we can suggest. So it works really nicely.
Great. And Lauren?
Yeah, no, I was going to say something very, very similar. I've got a client at the moment and she is on sleeping tablets. So trying to kind of move her towards something more natural that's going to really help to kind of caveat what she's been on is obviously really beneficial. But also for my clients who suffer with anxiety and mental health concerns, I think sometimes it's nice for them to have like a little bit of a buffer, something like Marishka's drops of balance that that are in a pipette that you can just take when you're on the go as a nice little clutch, should I say, for when you're out and about and you're just feeling those moments of tension or anxiety. And obviously it's not to say that supplements should outweigh a balanced diet and lifestyle, but like Marishka was saying, they all work in tandem in part of the picture of a holistic balanced lifestyle, and sometimes they can really help to just kind of support those who've got those mental health concerns or trouble sleeping.
Perfect, thank you. I guess, yes, stress and sleep are really, really interlinked, aren't they? So yeah, maybe that's another sign. If you're struggling with sleep, then it's, your mind might be racing, you might be stressed and you might not realise it. So yes. Okay, I think that's all the questions I have, but we're going to go to some questions from the audience. So Natasha has asked, she's happy for this question to go to anyone, so jump in if you feel really passionately that you want to answer it. It says, what do you believe the split between external and internal stress is? For example, two people could be in the same situation but feel very differently about it. I guess maybe that's like a handling of stress, a perception of the situation, perhaps.
Could you read the question again?
Yes, sure. What do you believe the split between external and internal stress is? For example, two people could be in the same situation but feel very differently about it.
I mean, I have to admit that it really depends on, because that's a really good question, actually. It really depends on what's happening in the background. So if someone's got, a lovely, calm, relaxing life and generally doesn't have a huge amount of stress in their lives, and then suddenly something hits them that's quite stressful, they might have a bit more resilience and an armory almost to tackle that stress. But if you've got a lot going on in your life and you've got a lot of stress, even just in that day, and you're feeling hugely overwhelmed, even just that one little stress could tip you over the edge and you could react completely differently to someone who's actually got quite a calm background going on. So I think it's really what else is going on in your life, and or even just in that day, what's happened that day, but also how you perceive. So it's all based on your experiences as well. So if that particular thing really triggered you because you've got a past bad experience, and you're going to react completely differently to someone who's never had a bad experience to that stress. And so it really is based on past experience, what's going on in your surroundings as well, and how you at that time feel. So if you're feeling super calm, you're not going to react as sort of aggressively perhaps as if you were super overwhelmed at that time. So I think there's a lot of things that could play into that.
Thank you. We had another question in advance of this by email. We had a few actually, so we'll jump to those, and then if anyone else has got anything, feel free to pop them in the comments. So we've actually got a couple that are linked to food. So I always eat sweets and chocolate when I'm stressed. How can I cut this out? I'm definitely guilty of this one. I eat my feelings.
Okay. So I think, well, first of all, we didn't really touch too much on how stress impacts our cravings and our food choices. But first of all, to crave certain foods when we are stressed is very, very normal. And so it's important, first of all, not to necessarily beat yourself up for feeling that way. And it's essentially your body's kind of biochemistry, in the way that we respond to stressful events. So, for example, if we're feeling stressed, we do crave those sugary, starchy, high-fat foods, because what they can do is they actually hijack these brain chemicals, these neurotransmitters in our brain called serotonin and dopamine. And these are two brain chemicals that are known to regulate mood and help to alleviate feelings of anxiety and make us feel happier. So when we actually eat these foods, we do actually get this reward mechanism. We actually feel better, and actually it can dampen down very temporarily this cortisol response, this stress hormone. So we actually get this temporary high when we eat sugar, high carbs, high starchy foods. And obviously it's important to kind of understand what happens with our blood sugar when we eat these types of foods. So our pancreas secretes insulin when we eat anything that's high in refined sugars. And as a result, we get this peak in our energy, and then our energy level drops soon after. And this is what's called the blood sugar roller coaster. So we kind of end up on this kind of yo-yo effect, because no sooner or later, when we're down here and our energy levels are down here, we'll crave something sugary or chocolatey again, just to kind of go up here. So we're on kind of this instability mode throughout the day, and it's just understanding that. And I think the more we can become aware of our food choices, and the more educated we are, the better we are placed to actually make smaller changes. And it's about those small changes. And first of all, not beating yourself up for, at this moment in time, I think we can all be forgiven for eating a little bit more chocolate or sugar than we maybe necessarily would have done. But just, I think, understanding what's happening, that it is a stress response and it's your body's way of maybe giving yourself a temporary fix. And then just trying to figure out how you can replace those treats with other types of foods and snacks. For example, always try and make sure you're having a source of protein and lots of fiber in a food, which is going to help to slow down the release of sugar into the blood. So like a handful of nuts and seeds, for example, would do the trick. So, just something that you could switch to. Small kind of changes would definitely make the difference.
Great. And then I think the second one around food is someone who's also kind of stress eating, if you like. They're worried they're going to come out of lockdown a little bit plumper than we went in. And again, I'm worried about this. How can we kind of control it, or control our worries about it, I think is a good question, because as you said, you have to be kind to ourselves in this situation.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I noticed the word control, and I think it's so important to be aware of the language that we use in our own heads and how we speak to ourselves. Because if we talk about control with food, nobody eats the perfect diet 100% of the time. I'm a nutritionist. I'm not going to lie and say that I don't eat sugar or I don't eat treats now and then. I think the important thing to remember is just being mindful of that. And if you feel that, I guess your eating habits are, I'm trying to find another word instead of control, but you're really struggling to get a handle out of it, I would say practice things like stimulus control, which is where you're looking at the foods that are in your kitchen. Make sure you're being very mindful of what you're buying and what you've got stocked in the cupboard. So if you don't have them in, you're less likely to binge on those types of foods.
Yeah.
I always practice something called and work with my clients, which is where, for example, if somebody notices themselves, and again, it's the key step is being aware. If you notice yourself, say, in the kitchen and you're halfway through the second or third slice of cake or whatever it may be, one, it's catching yourself, but also pairing that with something that's self-love related. So I call this and work, because it's the juxtaposition between two different opposing behaviors. One is more kind of self-sabotaging, and the second is, self-love related. It's related to having self-esteem and self-respect. So if you can say, catch yourself when you're engaging in those types of eating behaviors and pair it with something that is going to help you to feel better in yourself. It might be that you go away and paint your nails, or you go and get a bubble bath, or you give yourself a small hug, or just something that represents, okay, I respect myself, I respect my body. And it's a really great way to kind of step out of those self-sabotaging behaviors and just into new types of behaviors as well. So I'd say and work, stimulus control, and just not being too hard on yourself as well, because, you know, we all go through it. And I think just being mindful and being aware is the key.
Great, thank you. Some really good advice there. I'll just do one more. It says, at the minute, I'm worrying about what I should be worrying about. How can I stop this? Maybe, Christie, do you have any advice on worrying about worrying?
I mean, to be honest, that's a really difficult question, because I guess if you've got nothing to worry about, then why worry? I guess the main thing is that is that what she was trying to say? Was it I'm worried about not worrying, or I'm worried about worrying?
I'm worried about what I should be worrying about. So should I be worried about
if she
this,
doesn't have
or should I
anything
be
to
worried
worry
about
about,
that?
then that's amazing. You know, that's incredible. I'm glad that you don't have anything to worry about. But essentially, I would say, you know, I think being worried and anxious is a natural thing that we all go through, and I guess it's all based on sort of experience. But you know, I would say what Lauren said is so important, because it's just being aware of why you're actually feeling worried or anxious. And I work a lot with my clients through really understanding their thoughts and their feelings. And often what happens is we go through our day-to-day lives worrying about things, and actually we don't stop and think about why that is. And so I often get people to actually stop and pause and just take a breath and think, you know, why am I feeling this way? What is that thought? You know, why is that there? And often when you do this practice, this sort of self-reflective practice, it actually helps you to understand what's actually triggered you to worry, what's triggered you to feel anxious. And then you can sort of unravel it and maybe try and put something in place to stop you from worrying, like mindfulness or meditation or some deep breathing or exercise, and almost do a distraction method if you are feeling worried about something, to try and take that worry away, like deep breathing or sort of going for a walk or something. I don't know if I actually answered that at all, but I found that quite hard. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Hopefully it answered, and hopefully the person that sent it in is watching. So we've just got another one here, which is actually for Lauren. And it's almost a little bit linked to being mindful. I find myself always doing something else whilst I'm eating. Eating lunch at my desk, putting washing on while eating, my breakfast. How important is it to be mindful when we're eating?
I'd say very, very important. When it comes to a digestive health perspective, we actually, when we engage with our phone or we do other things in the midst of trying to eat at the same time, we actually forego a critical process of digestion, which is called the cephalic phase of digestion. And this is when we look at food. It's when we use our sensory organs. So we look, we smell, we really start to engage in the food in front of us. And as a result, we start to produce all of our gastric juices, our salivary enzymes come into play. And this is obviously going to help to break down our foods. And if we're not triggering that key stage of digestion, we're going to end up with a lot of digestive troubles, such as bloating, gas, and abdominal pain and cramps. So it's really important to kind of just try and, again, be mindful. Don't beat yourself up if you're on your phone every once in a while. You know, it's individual, but I think just paying attention to how much you're doing it, because obviously we want to appreciate the food that we're eating and we want to have a positive relationship with it. And I think when we're kind of going through our day and we're just doing all kinds of different tasks and eating throughout the day and not focusing on our nutrition, that's when we can start to eat the wrong types of foods and that kind of thing. So I think just being mindful of the way that you eat, and make it more of a ritual, like sit at the dinner table with your family and make it a scheduled event, rather than, you know, just necessarily kind of floating through emails and eating your dinner. Because if we appreciate the food, we start to become mindful of what we're eating, we start to engage with the digestive process, and everything else will flow together seamlessly. So I think it's a process, but it's just becoming aware, and don't beat yourself up if you're not doing it all the time, but just try and make it a bit of a ritual if you can.
Yeah, perfect. Last question is from me as well, just in terms of, it's a personal thing, but when I'm supplementing, I find it really, really difficult to remember to take the supplements. Marishka, have you got any advice on how I can be better at doing that?
Yeah, lots of people say that, lots of people. So it's really about habits. And so what is it? Is it a habit is formed in 28 days or something like that? It's, you know, if you're taking capsules, you know, I have those little pill boxes that literally have the days of the week on, and it's just out next to the kettle. So in the morning, the kettle goes on, a glass of water, and it's the first thing I do. To be honest, and it is just about getting into that routine. What I've heard lots of people say to me is that's why they find actually the little drops really handy, because they can just pop them in a bag with the drops of balance and the immunity defense ones. They can just be on the go with you, and somehow people seem to, if they've opened their bag, obviously not quite at the minute, but you know, when we're back to, you know, more of a daily normal thing. So it's finding a time that fits with you, whether that be you place them by your toothbrush, or you have them by your kettle, or they're sitting on your desk. Lots of people say to me they've got them, you know, at their desk. So everyone's desks at home at the moment. So it's just where you would remember. And I think with ours, but you know, when you do get those regular habits, you will see a difference. You know, once you start taking them day in, day out, you will definitely, you know, start to feel a difference over time.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think we'll pause it there. I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but conscious we might want to have a little cup of tea and head to bed soon. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching tonight and bearing with us on our first foray into virtual events. It's definitely something that I felt a little bit stressed about earlier today. If you did want to learn more about the products that Marishka has been talking about, the Life Armour range, the link is in the comments below. And if you want to purchase any of those, you can get a 15% discount on our website using the code LifeArmour15. Lauren is going to be offering 15% off the Ardere candles with the code webinar15, and also 15% off her Transform Your Nutrition program. And then Christie is offering one session free when you book a set of 4 consultations on her website, and again, it's linked in the comments. And then there's also our events lineup, so you can see what's in store next week. We're actually talking about sustainable beauty, so slightly different topic but just as interesting. So if you wanted to sign up to that, we'll have a few other experts that will be joining us then. Thank you, Lauren, Christie and Marishka. It's been really, really interesting.